Welcome to America's Heroes Group.
And welcome to America's Heroes Group with our roundtable and our partner, Jesse Brown, VA Works. December is AIDS Awareness and National Human Rights Month. Today is Saturday, December 10th, 2022. Just heard our host, Cliff Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host, Army National Guard veteran. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And we have a great show for you today and a great segment. Our panelist has joined us today, Robert Christopher. He is the executive for Jesse Brown VA Business Development. We're going to talk about business development at the Jesse Brown VA. When I think of business development, I'm thinking about ways to make money. So, Christopher, can you tell us what business development means to you in the Jesse Brown VA?
Sure. So every hospital has a business development office, and they pretty much have the same function, and that is, you kind of nailed it, to bring in new patients. Recruit patients, retain patients. That's the primary function of business development. Now, when I tell people what I do, and when I tell them that I do it at a VA, a lot of times I get this reaction, well, wait a minute. Why does the VA need an office like that? I mean, the veterans, they're sort of a captive audience. Where else are they going to go? And maybe 20 or 30 years ago, or even 10 years ago, that would be a fair statement, but as you may know, within the last 10 years, there's been a number of actions in Congress that have given veterans choices in where they receive their care. And so now we are having to compete not only with other VAs, but with every hospital in this market, which I think is a good thing. It makes us better. So that's pretty much, from a 10,000-foot view, what business development is at Jesse Brown.
Is that a standard thing at VAs across the country, or is that something unique to Jesse Brown?
I think it will become a standard thing. I think that's the direction that we're all going in. But I think Jesse Brown was one of the first, if not the first, to have a business development office. So in my office, I have a team of, well, we're growing, actually. I started out with 10. I think now we're up to 15. But so all the communications and public affairs folks are under me. Strategic planning, data analysts, market research. I have 2 market growth coordinators. I believe you talked to Laura and Patrick, or they were on this segment either a month or 2 ago. So I have a full team. It's not just me, and I'm really fortunate because my team have a lot more talent in this than I do.
I know it's a lot of work and a lot of time to put into business development. So you can tell us how does this help veterans as a whole?
Well, so in the area we serve, so Jesse Brown's, we call it a catchment area. If we were a church, we'd call it a parish. So our catchment area is the city, everything within the city limits of Chicago, near south suburbs, and then 6 counties in northwest Indiana. Mm-hmm. And within that catchment area, we estimate that there are approximately 55,000 eligible unenrolled veterans. So they're eligible to come to Jesse Brown for care, but for a variety of reasons, they're not enrolled. So how this benefits veterans is we have an opportunity to get out into the community in Chicagoland and in Northwest Indiana to talk to veterans in a general sense about their benefits with the VA, benefits that they've earned and paid in full. Think of it like the world's biggest HMO, except for veterans, there's no premiums. They earned it. And we get to tell them about that. And we're more than just a hospital. We do a whole lot of things. And we get to share that with them. And then we ask them to, consider coming to see us. And even if they'd come, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and maybe the experience they had wasn't the best, we ask them to give us another chance because I wasn't there 10 years ago, but we're not the same place they might remember.
Now, from understanding, you're not a veteran, is that correct?
That's correct.
So what motivated you to get into business development and to get into helping veterans?
Well, thank you. I get asked that question a lot, and I love answering that question. So I started my career in the VA. I think everyone really who's drawn to a career in healthcare, whether it's in the VA or not the VA, we're drawn to it for the mission. we're people who work in healthcare are typically very mission focused, and we have a very specific mission, taking care of people, helping people. When you add to that the very special mission that the VA healthcare system has, which is not only taking care of people and their health needs, but taking care of veterans, that just really resonated with me, because then the mission becomes super focused, super important. I'm not ashamed to say I'm patriotic, and I fully understand and respect the debt we all have to our veterans. And so it's an honor. And for me, I started my career in the VA, and then for about 15 years worked at Northwestern, which I loved. And then I came back to the VA. So it was a homecoming, but it made me realize this second round that working in the VA is not just a job, for me anyway. It's a vocation. And I don't think I'm alone in saying that. I think most of us who work there feel the same way.
So take me into a little bit more about business development, your job every day. What's the typical day like? How do you go about your job in order to try to get the information out there and try to develop and cultivate a bigger community coming to and utilizing the VA?
Yeah, so I wish there was a typical day. There really aren't any. But if I had to describe a typical day, it's we're doing a lot of planning, strategic planning in capturing, recruiting, meeting with those 55,000 eligible unenrolled veterans. And any strategic plan any good strategic plan has to be largely informed by data, and the data will point us in the direction we need to go. I can't just say, okay, there's 55,000 people out there, let's go get them, because they're not all in the same place, and we have a pretty big territory to cover. And we try to gather as much information as we can, not just geographic, but demographic. And if there's any health information that's out there, we try and get that too. And then it's working with and partnering with people throughout the community, government organizations, non-government organizations, churches, veteran service organizations, the police departments. They're great partners for us, by the way, law enforcement, because so many people who work in law enforcement are veterans. And a lot of them, because as police officers, they typically have very good benefits, but as they start to retire, they become very interested in their veterans benefits. And so it's a great opportunity for us to talk to them. So we're planning, we're partnering, we're out in the community. I tell people that the work we do is not unlike that of a fundraiser. To be successful as a fundraiser, you have to do three things. First of all, you have to establish a relationship. Secondly, you have to tell the story of the organization you're raising funds for. And then you make the ask. And that's what we do, except we're not asking for money. We're asking for veterans to consider coming to Jesse Brown for their health care.
It's got to be the easiest sell when you think about it, because like you mentioned, you're basically not paying any premiums to use the services. And it's something that's beneficial for really any veteran. For like me personally as a veteran, I mean, I never really thought of, because I had private insurance and private care on the side, utilizing the VA. But then as I got older and also doing this show and hearing stories like the things that you guys do in the real world, it made me more curious and actually started to realize that it's something I really need to investigate and make sure that I get the most out of what's available to me. It just makes sense. And also, coming from a veteran's perspective, a lot of things that people can see in the VA may not be things that I can get in the civilian world, which I thought was really, really helpful. So I really appreciate the work you guys do. And I think it's so important that people really don't realize is that you have to get out there and get the word out. And the work that you do is so important for that reason. So you have an event coming up. Tell us about the Pact Act event Jesse Brown is hosting on Tuesday, December 13th, which is coming up this week coming up. What is that about?
So system-wide throughout the country, this next week, starting tomorrow, the VA is having what it's called Pact Act Awareness Week. I have to say that slow. Pact Act Awareness Week. And at Jesse Brown, we'll be having a town hall on, as you said, Tuesday the 13th from 5 to 6:30. Anyone who's interested, whether they're a Jesse Brown patient or not, anyone who's interested, think they might have an interest in the Pact Act and what that covers, and I'll get into that in a moment, is welcome to attend, and you can attend either in person or virtually. But as many people know, when veterans who serve our country are overseas, many of them have been exposed to toxic hazards, things like toxic air, radiation, smoke, Agent Orange, burn pits, and other environmental hazards. And years later, those exposures have sometimes caused veterans to develop health conditions which impacted and in some cases took their lives long after the battle had fallen silent. So for too long, too many of these veterans and their survivors weren't able to get the toxic exposure-related care and benefits they needed and deserved. But fortunately, thankfully, those days are over, and thanks to this new law called the Pact Act, which I believe the president signed in August of this year.
Sounds about
the
right.
The VA has expanded health care and benefits for millions of veterans and their survivors. I think this is actually the biggest expansion in the history of veterans health care.
Yeah.
And it includes a lot of Vietnam-era veterans, Gulf War veterans, and post-9/11 veterans. So to put it simply, any veteran who served in the Vietnam era, the Gulf War era, or the post-9/11 era may be eligible for new or increased health care and benefits as a result of this new law. If you would choose to attend our town hall in person on Tuesday, not only will you get to hear from speakers, from our physicians about this, you'll also have an opportunity to have a toxic exposure screening. We'll have representatives there from the Veterans Benefits Administration, the VBA, who can assist with filing claims. And then there'll be people there from Jesse Brown eligibility to help veterans enroll if they're not already enrolled. So if you think this might be the thing for you, I would strongly encourage you to attend in person. If you're not able to, then definitely attend virtually.
Now, you said this is for veterans and non-veterans. Is that right?
It's for veterans and their survivors. So yes.
Okay. I think that's important for all veterans to really think about attending this event. It's Tuesday, December 13th at the Jesse Brown VA. Make sure you make an effort to get to the Pact Act event for Jesse Brown. I think it's really critical that you mentioned also something really important, I think, is the screening, because a lot of people have no idea what they've been exposed to. And there's so many things that we touch and deal with, in our different occupations, whether you're in infantry or whether you're a mechanic or whether you're in medical field. There's so many things that we have touched. And if you've been deployed, oh my God, it's like a lot of stuff that's out there. Burn pits we talked about in our show before. I think it's really important to go out there and get screened to see what is in your body, to make sure that you are taking care of your health and being so proactive about taking care of your health. What would you say to veterans about the need to use the VA beyond this event, but what would you want to say to veterans to make them be more interested? If you had a 30-second commercial you wanted to give right now, what would that look like or sound like?
Well, I'm not trying to poach someone away from a doctor. If they're happy with their doctor, great. I would still encourage them to enroll in the VA because, as I said, the VA is like an insurance policy. The premiums are paid in full. You never know when you'll need us. I think we learned that experience through COVID with so many people losing their insurance and so forth. We're there for the veterans whenever they need us. But for those who are thinking about maybe changing or are coming to the VA for the first time, I would say please consider it. We've been taking care of veterans for 75 years. We do it better than anybody else. We have the full rate. We are a tertiary facility at Jesse Brown. We're affiliated with Northwestern and the University of Illinois. We have some of the top doctors in the world working at our hospital, and that's because we think our veterans deserve the best. They get the best. And I would also add, if you live in areas near one of our outpatient clinics, we have 4, one in Crown Point in Indiana, one on the Northwestern campus downtown, and then one on the south side in the Auburn Gresham neighborhood and finally one in Chicago Heights. So we're trying to get closer to our veterans. We realize not everybody can come to the Illinois Medical District, so we're looking to get closer to where our veterans live.
And that's interesting because we do a show that basically goes out around the world, but for the most part, the majority of our audience is across the United States. Jesse Brown is, from my understanding, from my experience working with Jesse Brown, being there myself, and also having traveled to the two VAs here in Illinois. Both of those VAs, Hines and Jesse Brown, are exceptional facilities. I've been so impressed by. I've taken other veterans when they had serious health issues to the hospitals, and they have been amazing at how attentive and also how concerned they are about taking care of these people. I mean, these are, at the end of the day, these are veterans, these are people, these are human beings that need sometimes emergency treatment, sometimes just regular checkups and things like that. That is something I've even wanted to see more of in the civilian hospitals here in Illinois. We have some of the best in the country in this area. Now, having said that, some people would be listening to this. They're maybe in an area that and they had they've had heard horror stories in the past about the VA and how things have been, or maybe had bad experiences with other people they've known, maybe even family members and things like that. How do you differentiate, or could you differentiate, the type of level of excellence you see at the Jesse Brown VA versus what you see across the country? What would you recommend to someone who's in an area who does not maybe familiar with their local VA? How do they determine whether or not their VA is up to the same standard as, say, a Jesse Brown here is in Chicago?
I would say go to if they live outside of the Chicagoland area. I can speak to the VA hospitals in this area, but if they live outside of the Chicagoland area, go online and Google search your local VA, pull it up. Like us, it will have satellite clinics as well. So even if you live, say, 40 or 50 miles away from the closest VA hospital, chances are pretty good that there's an outpatient primary care clinic closer to you where you can get primary care and in some cases behavioral health care. And then you probably will want to ask veterans in your area who have gone to those clinics for their feedback. I think that's really important. They're going to tell you their experience. And I would ask more than one person, because it's sometimes when you ask somebody an opinion and you ask 10 people an opinion, you get 10 different answers. But I would encourage them to do their research as they would when they're looking for health care anywhere. And there is a saying, you talk about, because the VA is not only the nation's largest healthcare system, it's a public system. So that means our warts are a little bit more exposed than everybody else's, but they have warts too. But if you've seen one VA, you've seen one VA. We're all different. We have the same name. We work for the same enterprise. But, Jesse Brown and Hines are both excellent facilities, but we're not the same. We have our differences. We have those things which make us special. So I would tell people, if they heard something or a horror story that happens in, Phoenix, Arizona, don't assume that's happening everywhere else, because they're not.
I think that's really important. I think you said something really, really critical, and I think people need to understand that all hospitals are not the same, even in the Jesse Brown system, even in the Illinois system, but even across the country in the VA system in general. Every place has their own strengths and weaknesses and specialties based on the demographics that they serve. So I think it's so important that we basically, take a look at what's in your community and then investigate like anything else. Unfortunately, I've been reading too much that, especially in rural areas, a lot of veterans are not taking advantage of even doing the investigation to find out what's in their area. And that concerns me a little bit. In urban areas, it seems like it's a little more, it's easier to get to a VA hospital. But in rural areas, it seems like we talk to a lot of veterans in rural areas, they don't seem to have even an inclination to reach out and see what is available, but they are suffering and have a lot of serious health ailments. And a lot of these people are just struggling through it without getting any kind of help. So if you're in that situation, reach out and find out what is there in your area and get the help. I think it's so critical.
Right, absolutely. Do that research. And as I said, even if you live some distance from the nearest VA hospital, chances are you live very close, or closer than you think, to a VA clinic.
Robert P. Christopher joined the Jesse Brown VA as an executive business for business development in March of 2021. He's a Memphis native. Thanks for your time and thanks for being on our show.
My pleasure. Have a good evening.
This is America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back.